My parents always called me the family failure. After years without contact, they tried to kick me out when I showed up at my grandfather's 80th birthday party. Growing up, I always felt overshadowed by my older sister, Megan. She was everything our parents seemed to value. Academically gifted, disciplined, and always getting perfect grades. Megan had a natural focus and determination that made her seem almost flawless in their eyes. Meanwhile, I was the complete opposite in many ways. I struggled to focus in school, procrastinated everything until the last minute, and was constantly forgetful. It wasn't just academics. These challenges extended to all areas of my life, making me feel like I would never measure up. I didn't understand why I was like this, and honestly thought I was simply lazy or incapable. It wasn't until much later in life that everything finally made sense to me. I had ADHD, and the diagnosis was a revelation. Suddenly, all the struggles and frustrations of my childhood clicked into place. Every symptom I had dealt with, from my inability to focus to my chronic procrastination, fit perfectly into the picture of this disorder. With the help of medication and other tools, I've been able to turn my life around and approach things with a sense of control I never knew was possible. But back then as a child there was no diagnosis, no understanding, no support. All my parents saw were my flaws. To give some context, my parents are incredibly successful people, high-achieving academics, highly respected in their fields, and holding prestigious positions in their work. Naturally, they expected the same level of excellence from their children. They wanted Megan and me to be the most successful people in any room. Megan, of course, met those expectations effortlessly. I, on the other hand, was the problem child in their eyes. I didn't work hard enough, wasn't disciplined enough, and wasn't good enough. They frequently compared me to Megan, their golden child, which only deepened the gap between my sister and me. Those comparisons hurt more than they probably realized, making me feel like there was something fundamentally wrong with me just because I was different from her. Megan didn't make my childhood any easier either. We attended the same school, and I often felt like I could never escape her shadow or her judgment. If I didn't finish my homework on time or got into trouble at school, she would yell at me, spending hours telling me how ashamed she was to have a loser brother like me. Those words wounded me deeply, especially coming from someone I was supposed to look up to. At home, Megan would tattle on me to our parents for the most insignificant things like hanging out with my friends instead of studying. She constantly sought ways to prove to them that she was the better daughter. I think part of it was because, unlike me, Megan didn't have friends. She was the typical know-it, always acting superior and ready to pounce on anyone who made the slightest mistake. It's no wonder people didn't like her. She isolated herself, and instead of reflecting on why, she clung even tighter to her condescending attitude. Despite its effects, my parents completely adored her. They never corrected her behavior or encouraged her to be kinder or more humble. Instead, they celebrated her as if she could do no wrong. They bragged about Megan constantly at family gatherings, at work, with neighbors, with anyone who would listen. Every year, they threw her extravagant birthday parties with fancy decorations, guests, and expensive gifts. They made it clear they believed Megan deserved to be celebrated because, in their words, she was the only good thing that had come out of their marriage. Can you imagine hearing your own parents say something like that about your sibling, as if you were worthless in comparison? Meanwhile, my birthdays were almost an afterthought. There were no parties, no excitement. Every year I received the same predictable gift, books. And they weren't fun, imaginative books a kid might enjoy. They were always educational books, the kind that screamed, "You need to try harder." When my sister graduated from college, it was a monumental moment for my family. She got into one of the best universities in the country, and my parents were absolutely thrilled. They couldn't stop talking about her accomplishments, bragging to anyone who would listen about how proud they were of her. 2 years later, when it was my turn to graduate, the situation couldn't have been more different. I didn't get into a prestigious university like Megan. Instead, I went to an average college that, compared to hers, didn't hold the same prestige. In my parents' eyes, their disappointment was palpable. My father didn't even try to hide it. He told me directly that he no longer had any hope for me. He said he just wanted me to disappear from their lives because he was too ashamed to tell our relatives which college I was going to attend. Those words shattered me. Hearing your own father practically disown you just because you didn't meet some unrealistic standard is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. My parents called me the black sheep of the family. They said they regretted having me, and that raising me had been a waste of time and resources. Megan also made it clear that she was disgusted by the idea of me attending the university I had chosen. She told me that while she didn't expect me to reach her level of academic excellence, I should have at least tried harder. Her words stung. For them it was never enough, no matter how hard I tried. I was so hurt by their attitude and comments that at that point I made a decision. If they truly felt that way about me, if they genuinely believed I wasn't worth their time or love, then I would do them a favor and cut them out of my life. I wasn't going to stay in an environment that only tore me down. I promised myself to forge my own path, no matter how difficult it might be, and not look back. Going to college was a completely new chapter for me, but it came with its own challenges. I had to take out student loans to afford it, and I also got a part-time job to support myself. Balancing work, studies, and managing my ADHD was incredibly difficult. There were times when I felt like giving up, but I didn't. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who believed in me, friends who supported and encouraged me, who saw my potential instead of my flaws. With their help, and with the right medication to manage my disorder, I started building a life that felt meaningful and fulfilling. Today, I'm an AI solutions architect, working at a leading multinational corporation. For the past 9 years, I haven't had any contact with my parents or my sister, nor have I attempted to follow their lives. I've worked hard to distance myself from that part of my past because it brought me nothing but pain. I generally avoid family events altogether to avoid the risk of running into my parents or Megan. However, this time it was my grandfather's 80th birthday. He called me personally and begged me to come. I hadn't seen him in a long time. He's one of the few people in the family who has always shown me kindness, and I couldn't bear the guilt of disappointing him on such a special occasion. Against my better judgment, I decided to go. When I arrived at the party, I noticed my parents were already there. I expected it, of course, but seeing them in person after so many years still stirred up emotions I wasn't fully prepared to face. Despite how I felt, I reminded myself why I was there. This was for my grandfather's birthday. I approached him discreetly, gave him a hug, and spent the rest of the time greeting others, exchanging words and smiles with relatives who were genuinely surprised and happy to see me. Many of them hadn't seen me in almost a decade, so they were excited to catch up. But then my parents saw me. I noticed the expression on their faces, stunned, as if they couldn't believe I was there. Almost immediately, my father approached me with an unreadable expression and asked if he could speak with me in private. I agreed, so he guided me away from the rest of the party, leading us to a more secluded corner of the venue, away from the curious gazes of the guests. From the very beginning of the conversation, my parents made it absolutely clear they weren't happy to see me. There was no attempt at cordiality, not the slightest sign of reconciliation. My father's first question was direct and cold. "What are you doing here?" Calmly, I explained that I had come because my grandfather had personally asked me to, that he had invited me to his 80th birthday celebration, and that I simply couldn't ignore him. My mother wasn't satisfied with that answer. She immediately wanted to know why I had never attended my grandfather's previous birthdays or any other family events, but now suddenly decided to show up. She provoked me with her words, insinuating that coming for my grandfather was just an excuse. She asked me if I had finally come to my senses, and if I was looking for an opportunity to reconnect with them after all these years. Her words infuriated me, but I maintained my composure. I replied firmly and clearly that I had no interest in having any contact with them again. It's not like I needed their permission to attend my own grandfather's party. If my presence bothered them so much, they could simply continue to ignore me and leave me alone to enjoy myself with the others. However, my mother argued that they wished they could ignore me, but people would start asking questions. She said I should have at least given them advance notice, so they could be better prepared to answer any questions about me. Honestly, she was acting as if I had committed a crime or something. I told her that if anyone asked, they could simply tell the truth. That I was doing very well in life, that I had built a successful career, and that I had an incredibly supportive partner. My father let out a scoff upon hearing this and said, "Do you really expect us to believe that? That you have a successful career? You didn't even graduate from a decent university, for God's sake." I felt a surge of anger rising within me. I had built my career from scratch, overcoming countless obstacles, And yet there he was, dismissing everything I had accomplished with a single sentence. Before I could respond, my father pointed to the door and coldly said, "You should leave. People can't know that you're still a failure." I was stunned. Who did they think they were to ask me to leave a party that wasn't even about them? How could they continue to treat me like this? They were so obsessed with protecting their image and appearing superior in front of others that they didn't even realize how cruel their words were. Their condescending and dismissive words made me realize that, in their minds, I was still the same child they could control. However, I wasn't that person anymore. If they were so worried about what people might say, I decided I would give them a lesson they would never forget. Without a second thought, I pushed past them and walked back towards where the other guests were gathered. My grandfather immediately noticed something was wrong and came over to see what was going on. I didn't hold back. I told him everything. I told him what my parents had said to me, how they tried to kick me out of the party, and how they continued to feel so ashamed of me that they didn't even want people to know I was there. Upon hearing this, my grandfather was furious. He assured me that my parents had no right to treat me that way, let alone ruin his birthday by causing such a drama. He said he would talk to them on my behalf, but I replied that it wouldn't make any difference. What we really needed was to bring the truth out into the open publicly. Fortunately, my grandfather agreed with me. So I raised my glass and tapped it gently to get everyone's attention. The room fell silent and all eyes turned towards me. I took a deep breath, kept my voice steady, and began by congratulating my grandfather on reaching such an incredible milestone. I thanked him for inviting me and told him how much it meant to me to be there, celebrating with him. Then I shifted the tone of the conversation. I said how nice it was to see so many relatives after so many years, but I also explained why I hadn't been part of these celebrations for almost a decade. I'm sure many of you have wondered why I've never attended any family events in all these years. So I'm going to tell you the truth. I paused before continuing. It was because of my parents. The truth is, my parents have always treated me as if I were beneath them, making me feel like I was nothing more than a burden to them. Then I told everything. I explained how my parents had isolated me, making me feel like I would never be good enough, and how they had labeled me a failure my whole life just because I didn't meet their impossible expectations. I told them how I had paid for my college education with loans and part-time jobs without receiving a single bit of support from my parents. I made it clear that while I struggled to build my own life, they never bothered to contact me to see how I was doing. The room fell completely silent as I spoke. Some people exchanged uncomfortable glances, while others looked at my parents, who looked absolutely mortified. My mother was pale as I spoke, and my father looked furious. But I didn't stop there. I shared how throughout my childhood, my parents had favored Megan, showering her with love, attention, and opportunities, while labeling me as the black sheep of the family. I explained how their constant comparisons and cruel treatment had pushed me away, how they ignored my struggles with ADHD, and simply labeled me as lazy. They never tried to understand or support me. Then I added that now that I was an adult and had achieved success on my own, I didn't expect my parents to suddenly accept me with open arms. But what I never imagined, I said firmly, is that they would go so far as to reprimand me for attending my own grandfather's birthday, a party I was invited to by the honoree himself. It's absurd and hurtful. And I wanted everyone to know how ridiculous their behavior is. So for all these years that I didn't attend family events, it wasn't because I was rude or distant. I did it to protect myself, to heal from years of emotional wounds. I paused again and looked around before continuing. However, today, when I came here for my grandfather's sake, my parents tried to kick me out. They keep saying they don't want to answer questions about me because they're ashamed of who I am. I looked directly at my parents and concluded, that's why I wanted to speak here in front of all of you once and for all. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of allowing them to make me feel like I'm the problem. From now on, I will attend every family event, whether they like it or not. As I finished my speech, my grandfather and some of my cousins started clapping and cheering for me. Then they came over to hug me, showing their support. My parents, on the other hand, seemed frozen in place, unable to find a justification for their actions now that the truth was out in the open. For so many years they had controlled the narrative, but now everyone could see the reality of who they were and how they had treated me. After that, my parents quickly left, visibly embarrassed while I stayed, enjoying the rest of the party with my cousins and other close relatives. In the days following this incident, several relatives contacted me to express their support and congratulate me on telling the truth. Some told me I had been very brave to stand up for myself and denounce the unfair treatment I had endured for so long. A few even apologized for not having recognized what was happening sooner, or for not having sought me out earlier. However, not everyone agreed with the way I handled the situation. Some family members felt I should have kept the matter private, arguing that I had gone too far by exposing my parents publicly and humiliating them in front of the whole family. Update 1. I must say that all your comments have been incredibly kind. I'm sincerely overwhelmed by how many people have reached out to ask how I'm doing. For everyone asking, mentally I'm fine. Throughout my childhood, I got used to my parents treating me like trash. It was painful and I carried that suffering for a long time. Over time, I learned to defend myself. The moment at the party was the culmination of years of repressed emotions and hidden truths, and honestly, I'm glad I spoke up. I have no regrets about standing up for myself and finally letting the family know my side of the story. For those wondering where Megan was during the party, she wasn't there. According to one of my cousins, she was on a work trip, which explains why I didn't run into her, and honestly, I'm relieved. If she had been present, she would have sided with my parents and said something unpleasant. After all, Megan has always been quick to criticize and belittle me, so in a way, her absence was a small relief. Some have asked why, during those difficult times, I didn't seek financial help from other family members when my parents refused to support me. The truth is, back then I was young, naive, and easily influenced by their words. When my parents and Megan mocked me, insulted me, called me a failure, belittled my university, and questioned my worth, I ended up believing it. I thought the rest of my family would feel the same way. The idea of airing our problems in front of others and possibly facing even more rejection terrified me. I was also proud, so I decided to face everything on my own, no matter how difficult it was. As for my grandfather, I want to emphasize that he has always supported me in his own way. Financially, he has never been in a stable position, so I couldn't have counted on him to help me with my university studies. However, his emotional support has been invaluable. He has always believed in me and understood the dynamic between my parents and me. He knows the whole story, every detail, and has never judged me for cutting ties with them. In fact, I am deeply grateful to him for giving me the opportunity to speak at his party, and for supporting me when I decided to expose my parents for who they are. Since that day, I've learned from several relatives that my parents are facing a lot of backlash from people who were horrified to discover how cruel they had been to me. Many had no idea how far their behavior went because my parents had always painted me as the problem child. They had clearly created that narrative to protect their image while sweeping their toxicity under the rug. Now that the truth is out, their facade is finally crumbling. I can only hope that this public humiliation will serve as a wake-up call. Maybe, just maybe, they'll reflect on their actions and come to their senses. But even if they don't, I've already spoken my truth, and for the first time I feel like I can close this chapter. Update 2. Megan contacted me this week. She heard from our parents and some relatives about what happened at the party, and she called me immediately. As soon as I answered the phone, she started yelling at me, furious about everything that had happened. She couldn't believe I'd had the audacity to expose our parents publicly. She said all I wanted was to cause drama and that my actions were selfish. According to her, I had no right to air family problems in front of everyone, especially when our parents had spent years trying to move on with their lives without me. She kept insisting that I was ruining the fragile peace that had been established, and that I should just let it go and move on instead of dredging up the past. What do you want from them? An apology? Really? Why? Because they didn't pay for your university? Because they were disappointed in you? Because they always pushed you to be better? Because they wanted the best for you? I couldn't help but let out a sarcastic laugh. Megan had always sided with our parents, no matter how badly they treated me. She never understood the pain I had suffered, always minimizing it as simple family problems. For her, it was easier to pretend everything was fine than to face the truth. I pointed out that pressuring someone to be better doesn't mean humiliating or mocking them for years just because they don't meet certain expectations. What I needed from our parents wasn't just more pressure, but support, love, and understanding. I told her how much I wished they had been the kind of parents who saw me for who I was and helped me face my challenges, instead of belittling me for not living up to their impossible standards. I never asked for a perfect childhood. I just wanted parents who supported and understood me, not ones who saw me as a disappointment. Megan insisted that if I really felt that way, I could have resolved my feelings with them privately instead of exposing them publicly. She said our parents had worked years to build their image, and now it all seemed insignificant because people were only talking about how cruel they had been for abandoning me. Was it really worth it? She asked in a challenging tone, insinuating that all I did was out of resentment. She even suggested that maybe I hadn't achieved anything in my life, and that's why I was attacking our parents after all these years. At her words, I simply laughed. I calmly replied that despite everything horrible our parents and she had done to me, I had built a successful career. The reason I exposed them had nothing to do with my accomplishments, but with regaining control of my own story after years of being silenced and belittled. I had been rejected and treated as if I were the problem, but the truth is I was the victim in this whole situation. Exposing them wasn't to brag about how far I had come or to make them look bad, but to defend myself so people would know what had really been happening behind closed doors. Megan didn't give in and kept insisting that I should apologize publicly to protect our parents' reputation. I interrupted her immediately. I told her bluntly that I would never do such a thing. Why should I apologize when I'm the victim? I made it clear to Megan that she should open her eyes and stop defending those who treated me like trash my whole life. To annoy her further, I told her that from now on, I would attend all family events, no matter how much it bothered her or our parents. If they dared to confront me again, I would continue to expose them. Why should I allow their toxicity to control my relationships with the rest of the family? I have every right to see my relatives and form bonds with them. My sister claimed that all I wanted was to make our parents' lives miserable, and demanded that I cut contact with everyone again, as I had done all these years. I sighed in frustration. Megan and I were never going to agree, so I told her to stay out of my way from now on and mind her own business. I wasn't going to tolerate any more attempts by her to defend our parents or justify their behavior. I ended the conversation and blocked her number. At the end of the day, I owed her nothing, not an explanation, not an apology. Update 3. I just wanted to give a quick update on some things that have happened in the past 4 months. To start, I've made a conscious effort to be more involved in my family's life. I now make sure to attend all our family gatherings, whether they're big events like birthdays or anniversaries, or even smaller, more casual get-togethers. In addition, I've been spending more time with my grandfather, making sure to visit him regularly and see how he's doing. I've also been spending more time with my cousins. Whenever we have plans, whether it's to grab a bite, watch a movie, or just hang out doing something fun, I've made it a priority to join them. It's been great to strengthen those bonds and create new memories with them. Last month, my mom apologized to me after all this time. It was a big moment for me. Since both my mom and dad are blocked on my phone, she reached out via email. She shared that she had been going to therapy and spending a lot of time reflecting on the past. She admitted that she and my dad had, in a way, favored my sister over me and tried to justify it by saying that because both she and my dad grew up in strict, academically focused families, they always expected Megan and me to meet the same high standards. Then she went on to say that after I spoke for myself during my grandfather's party and revealed that I had ADHD, that was a turning point for her. She admitted to doing her own research after that and realized that I really did have it. She confessed to feeling guilty for not recognizing the signs earlier, and for not supporting me when I was a child, when I needed it most. In the email, she also wrote that she had been quietly following my career over the past few months through LinkedIn. She said she was incredibly proud of what I've accomplished. She also mentioned my dad at the end of the message. Although she said he's also aware of my achievements, she acknowledged that he's a very proud man, and will probably need a little more time before he's ready to reach out and offer his own apology. Honestly, I'm still surprised that my mom wrote all of that to me. If only she had been so understanding while I was growing up, my childhood could have been very different. That being said, despite her email, I still haven't unblocked her or my dad. I'm not ready to forgive them, not now.